Welcome back, Wagoneers, to this episode of In No Particular Order. Today we're actually going to discuss top 5 mixed martial arts fighters. This coming hot off of last night's UFC 297, where I haven't watched UFC in a little while, so I'm not sure if I'm saying this guy's name correctly. I don't know if it's Dricus or Dricus Duplessis. Defeated douchebag Sean Strickland for the middleweight title last night. So we figure it's only fitting that we're going to give our top 5 favorite UFC/mixed martial arts fighters of all time. Patrick is going to start us out. So who you got, Pat?
Okay. My list is going to be kind of quick. I'm not going to get into why I picked these people or so much the order. My list is basically just when I was following it more closely, these are the people I would I would try to watch, or at least I saw most of them. So there's no honorable mention. Straight to number 5. He's my number 5. He's on the list because he's a badass. It's Stipe Miocic.
There you go.
I've seen enough of his fights and knockdowns and knockouts to be like, it's a badass. Period. That's why he's on my list. Number 5, complete badass. Number 4 wasn't the biggest household name in MMA, but it's more of a personal thing because friends with mine would joke that I kind of look like this guy, and then I saw a T-shirt that he had that I loved the T-shirt and I bought it. It said "Hate on all day." It's Anthony Rumble Johnson.
That's what I was thinking.
I thought it might have been Mighty Mouse.
He got some consideration too, but yeah.
He died. You know that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
Anthony Rumble Johnson.
Yeah, he
Oh,
died.
Rumble.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Mighty Mouse.
Yeah.
okay.
But someone mentioned to me that I looked like him. It was a joke, and I kind of did maybe at that point how my hair was, but don't know much about him as a fighter other than a couple things I've seen. But yeah, apparently I look like Anthony Rumble Johnson, and I went with it.
Well, if you're going to compare, him to that Chalmette wrestling coach, I mean,
Yeah, they're pretty closely aligned.
Yeah.
My number 3, and this is a respect for the fighter that he was, and he was box office, and he's actually one of the best of all time to ever do it. Some people's number 1 possibly, George St. Pierre.
I think he's going to probably be on a few lists today, I guess.
I distinctly remember going to a friend's house to watch UFC fights because he was the headline, and his fights usually delivered. Whether he won or lost, they were usually good fights. So St. Pierre gets number 3. Number 2 is DC, Daniel Cormier. He's got a little bit of local ties to some here.
Yeah. I actually met him 2 weeks ago. Very nice guy.
Yeah, everything saying he's a nice guy. He hosts an MMA podcast with Ryan Clark, who's also a Louisiana native. But DC, he was a badass fighter too. Didn't look like your
wrestler, man.
Yeah, it didn't look like your prototypical, even for like a heavyweight, like ripped 6-pack, 8-pack. But the dude got it done in the ring.
Rummel's little junior wrestling program that my son wrestles for is called Raider Wrestling. They heavily announced that they were going to do a Daniel Cormier is actually the coach of a school out in California, and they agreed, we had through some ties with him being a local Louisiana guy, that his high school team was going to come wrestle against Rummel High School, which is 4 out of 5 of us alma mater. And of course they mopped the floor with Rummel, but no shame to Rummel there, because this was actually the 11th ranked team in the nation that came in. So Daniel's got that team rolling, and he agreed to do a photo op after and meet all the Rummel fans, and very nice gesture on his part. Was easy to talk to, had good conversation with his people. So he's not in my top 5, but he's pretty close just based upon me meeting him the other day.
Yep. My number 1 is the Spider, Anderson Silva. He was the first MMA fighter when I didn't really know much about the sport, but I just knew everyone talked about him. And he had the gnarliest MMA-related injury I've ever seen, or had seen to that date.
Yeah.
And I could still remember it happening and just being dumbfounded by watching it happen.
He had some skinny legs. Dumb bird legs.
But he could strike. He could wrestle a good bit with you. And he was, for a decent period of time, like the box office star.
Yeah,
and probably the reason I even paid much attention to MMA So that's why he goes as my number one.
I haven't kept up with the stats lately, but I mean, at one point in time, over his span, he was the most precise striker
Yeah.
in the MMA.
And an odd thing, so before UFC, well, I guess around the same time UFC started, a competitive organization in Japan called Pride Fighting Championships was going on at the same time. And UFC, once UFC kind of broke big, they started kind of recruiting a lot of the Pride fighters to come over and paying them bigger money. Anderson was one of these guys. A lot of the guys that they pulled from Pride had ridiculously good records, and Anderson wasn't one of them. Anderson had like a pretty average record when UFC pulled him over. So I remember when they got him, I wasn't thinking he was going to be anything special. I was like, oh, this guy's record in Pride wasn't that good. He's going to be an average guy, and he goes on this ridiculous win streak. Ends up becoming a long-time champion.
Wasn't his first fight against Rich Franklin? He absolutely demolished him.
Yeah, then he fought Chris Levin at one time, destroyed him. I mean, he went on a really long run of just like and he would knock out people because he would hit him in the almost like hit him in the temple almost every time, repeatedly. But and he was probably a BJJ black belt too, so that was the crazy part. He had great strikes and good at jiu-jitsu. But yeah, really good top number one.
Thank you.
I guess I would go next.
All right.
I'm not gonna have huge explanations of my people. I watched the UFC a while back. I kind of got out of watching it, but these are names that back when I was watching, they were really good, and I have some honorable mentions. One of the guys that I liked was Matt Hughes. I think he was a good MMA fighter. Another honorable mention, Conor McGregor. He's a boxer, fighter, but he's a showman, and I like him for that because he puts on a good show, and that's why he's honorable mention.
Yeah, so sometimes McGregor takes his showman antics to the next level to where you start to wonder, is he a showman or is he just a dude?
I have something to say
Well,
about him.
he portrays that, just like maybe the other like wrestlers, they have to have that persona and they have to have that extra piece to it just to get followers, fans, whatever, or to talk about, like, oh, this dude's an asshole, but any light is good light, right? So
And it almost makes like the haters like myself, more happy when he gets knocked out.
He's the king of negative publicity. Let's call it that. Yeah.
He I'll give him this credit for being a great talker and a promoter of fights, and that his fights, if I will say anything positive about it would be that he has some very memorable quotes when he was talking about fights and other fighters to promote the fight and get some hype going about it. So I'll give him credit for that.
in my list, going into it in no particular order except number one.
Okay.
Chuck Liddell. I mean, the guy's a beast. He's one of the founding fathers here. Really good dude.
I think where Chuck Liddell missed that, like Chuck Liddell was like a really good boxer, kind of like we talked about Anderson Silva. He hit with precision, but he never really learned the BJJ game. So it was always he relied on his takedown defense and his boxing to win. And after a while, when his age got higher, it kind of ended up not being able to advance with some of the more advanced fighters.
Yeah. Randy Couture is another one.
First ever pay-per-view Todd and I watched, Sean probably was there too, was Chuck Liddell versus Randy Couture in the main event. And I think that was did Couture win that one or Liddell? So I think they fought way more than once. I think Liddell might have actually won that one. And he ended up taking the title from Couture.
Yeah. So both of those, both iconic in the UFC. Probably one of the old timers, been around the longest. Ken Shamrock. He was pretty a monstrosity.
I mean, I know when most of us had no clue what MMA was, and he was kind of the face of it because we knew him from WWE.
Yep.
So then when we made that jump from WWE to UFC or MMA,
He was the
he was the guy we knew.
The guy. Yep.
Who was that?
Ken Shamrock.
Oh, Shamrock. Yeah.
Yep.
Dan Severn.
The Beast.
Then this guy that I don't know why, but I started following him a long time ago, and I just started liking the guy.
And I like his physique.
I want to say y'all got me an action a figure of him, Thiago Alves.
The Pitbull, yeah.
Yep, he's like I started watching him. He was real good, and then all of a sudden he just kind of fizzled off.
I think he must have got off the sauce because he was pretty jacked at one time.
Yeah, but my number one, and this is my number one. I just like Thiago, I followed him.
Just like the Pitbull, the real Pitbull singer.
Yes,
This is another one of Mike's long lost cousins.
long lost cousins. More endowed than I am. But this guy was a beast, and
In more ways than one.
in more ways than one. Yes, sir.
Well, you gotta
Yes,
have
sir.
something. You gotta have something to please Jenna Jameson. You know?
You know,
They still together?
he was he was good. He was good at MMA fighter. He's very popular. And this is Tito Ortiz, the Huntington Bad Boy.
It's a great nickname.
Yeah, he was cool.
I thought it was the Huntington Beach Bad.
Huntington Beach Bad Boy.
Yeah.
He's a cool dude, you know, hung like a horse. They had a naked picture of him, you know, come out viral.
We'll have to post.
Are we going to be posting that one on the socials?
Please do.
Twitter will allow it.
Let me
They
see
allow
what
it.
Twitter
allows it.
Can we do a side by side next to Mike though?
So small.
Wasted Wagons after dark.
On the next pod, we bring a ruler.
No, but that's my top MMA fighters.
I'll go next. We got two honorable mentions. One, I think we might have been the only one saying so far, was Ken Shamrock.
If Todd needs any help.
Yeah, everybody's pretty much in here except one. But Ken Shamrock, I'll give an honorable mention to. Obviously, when I first got into, you first really knew who he was from WWE. I had first gotten into, Travis at least first gotten into with MMA from the show The Ultimate Fighter, which followed WWE Raw. And then Ken Shamrock, of course, was on the main event of the Ultimate Fighter finale. And, I thought that, he ended up getting his ass kicked by Rich Franklin in that fight. But, I guess ever since then, you realize how much roots he had in MMA. The man's a legend. So for that, I put him in my honorable mentions. Another honorable mention, it was on one of the Ultimate Fighter seasons, nicknamed the Wizard, Ryan Hall. Dude's a BJJ expert. Very, very humble guy, not one of these overly flashy guys, but just an absolute, his nickname says it all. He's an absolute technical wizard. So my two honorable mentions would be Ken Shamrock and then Ryan Hall. My top five, number 5 is the natural born killer, Carlos Condit. Dude never had a boring fight. He was always entertaining. I believe he's still fighting to this day. The last couple fights I watched of his, he lost. He was a really entertaining fighter to his time. His fight with GSP was an absolute war. And after reading George St. Pierre's book, he even said that Carlos Condit was probably the hardest fight of his career. And if you really watch that fight, Carlos Condit had that fight won. So, I think that's a real credit to his name that George St. Pierre, an absolute legend, said that he was the hardest fight of his career. But overall, I loved watching every Carlos Condit fight. Plus, he had a really cool nickname, the Natural Born Killer. He's pretty handsome too.
It's a dish.
And it comes in at number 5. Number 4, the man I just mentioned, George St. Pierre, is my number 4. I have a feeling he may be on someone else's top 5 list as well. again, never a boring fight with the man. Always came in peak physical condition. But I think the thing that I really liked the most about him is that he was just a team player in and of itself. You know, he was very, very supportive of the other fighters. Was never a shit talker. Much like Ryan Hall, he was extremely humble. And he was just a warrior, man. Like he held that welterweight championship for a long time. So Condit 5, George St. Pierre 4. Number 3, the California Kid, Uriah Faber. First heard of him back in the WEC days before UFC bought WEC. He fought at bantamweight and flyweight. Is that what's the?
Maybe.
I'm trying to think about what's the one above bantamweight.
Is it where's welterweight?
Featherweight.
Featherweight. Okay.
He held belts in. I don't know if he ever did. He hold? I don't know if he held the belt in UFC or not, but he was the WEC champion for a while. Another guy that's just a pretty character, really entertaining to watch. Never really a shit talker. He was a coach on Ultimate Fighter. That season was probably the season I enjoyed the most watching because he coached it. Read his book as well.
Beautiful head of hair too.
Oh yeah.
Those blonde locks. Oh.
You see, I actually have. I have all the most of my top 5 figures up there. Faber, he actually had the option to get the long hair or the cornrows, and my brother Travis actually got me the one with the long hair, and he's like, "Man, I should have held off because they have one with the cornrows where he's got the WEC title and the blue gloves." So I'm like, I actually like that one better because I like it when he had the flowing locks better than the cornrows. Anyways, California Kid, Uriah Faber's number 3.
That dude never really aged. Like they would show his age on when he would fight, and he'd be like almost 40.
It's his name.
And I would be like,
baby
the dude
face.
looks like he's like 25, and he's almost 40. You know, and he's
Also
still in
very
great shape too.
Also very handsome. Number 2, I don't have his figure. They never made it, and he was actually banned from the UFC because one fight he choked some motherfucker out that wore a shirt during the weigh-in with his mugshot on it and called him a motherfucker. So he ends up choking the dude out, not letting go, and ends up putting his ass to sleep while he's tapping out. That's Renato Babalu Sabral.
I'm surprised he wasn't in Mike's
Again,
stuff.
man, like this dude, the second fight between him and Chuck Liddell, I was so confident that he would win that fight that I was talking shit to my father-in-law who like was all about Chuck Liddell. I was like, Babalu's gonna kick his ass. You know, he's got a better ground game. He's got power striking. He's gonna win this fight. Took the complete wrong approach. I mean, in the second fight, he ran at Chuck Liddell trying to knock him out and gets KO'd. But he's another one, you know, much like Carlos Condit, the dude always had entertaining fights. He was probably one of the best BJJ guys in the game for a while. Sadly, I found out that he has CTE and he's like blind in one eye. And he's like really, all these fighters kind of suffering some CTE going downhill now. But he's my second favorite fighter. Always put on an entertaining fight. Babalu, number 2. Number 1, I have the Pride Fighting Championship figure right there in the center. Beautiful $40 figure at the time. Probably worth $200 now. And that's the Texas Crazy Horse, Heath Herring. Very, very obscure pick. I really like. Obviously, what really caught my attention with the guy in Pride was the different kind of hairdos he had. He comes out wearing a trench coat, a cowboy hat, and he had his shirt, which is it's werewolf and something or other, which actually ended up getting stolen at one of the UFC fights. But he was another one of these guys that was extremely entertaining. His whole game, right? He was a good wrestler in Pride, but with Pride, his primary game was to take you down and knee you, particularly in the head, which in UFC was illegal. So when he transferred to UFC, his game didn't really translate as well. But he was a solid heavyweight, can always fight. He loved to stand there and bang. Good gatekeeper, much like Babalu, he was a good gatekeeper. Never really a heavyweight threat for the title in the UFC, but always put on an entertaining fight. Really good character as well. I actually started a Facebook group for him in Facebook, and some of his relatives actually joined it. So that's how I found out his werewolf t-shirt got stolen. So Texas Crazy Horse, Heath Herring, number 1.
Yeah, I'll be quick because I'd say like 4 and 5 is kind of jumbled because it's like I like so many from that era. You know, GSP, Rich Franklin, Forrest Griffin, Randy Couture, Liddell, all of those were all fun to watch. So that era was like, call it like 4 and 5. And number 3, I'll say McGregor, because the story, like what Mike was saying, is that I've always felt like he is he's a business in himself. He puts on a show, because back in 2013, it was I think it was the the Ultimate Fighter with Rousey and Tate, and they had an Irish woman contestant, and nobody knew who the hell Conor McGregor was, but he visited her on the show, and was like rooting for her, whatever. She was having like a hard time, whatever, and like he was like not the Conor McGregor anybody knows. He was like so chill. He was like talking to all other fighters, like he was still a no name, and he was like a completely different dude. It's like I feel like I need to go look that up and watch that again, because he's not long after that, maybe within the next year or so, he started blowing up and being this crazy cocky douchebag. And it was like, I feel like, not that he's like, it's literally 100% show, but I feel like he puts on a lot, he's a troll, he's being cocky, he's calling people. I mean, it's just, it's an act. He's a wrestler. He's got the charisma, and
he's playing the wrestling game on,
I mean, I can honestly say that I remember me and Biff at that pay-per-view. I think it was me and Biff alone. Biff, who's been on this podcast before, of when he fought Jose Aldo, and we were like really hard, like pulling for McGregor in that, and then he wins in 13 seconds, and it was like a good moment that we were like all into that. So I mean, it's like, not that I'm like that disappointed if he loses, but he's definitely one that I will watch. If someone says, I haven't watched a UFC card in years, but McGregor's in a fight, I'm like, I'll watch. He's entertaining. He definitely, brings the views and, brings the hype and everything. So it's like, I guess we watched one here, didn't we?
Yeah, probably the last one we watched was McGregor against Cerrone. And that was
Cerrone.
And, that was where we talked about the NFL getting rigged. I mean, that one seemed kind of fixed to me. It was McGregor's return from a long absence, and he beat Cerrone by shoulder him in the face, and I was like, it seemed like kind of a weak knockout end, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it had a lot of power behind it. But
were y'all over when we got the boxing match at my house? My dad and Biff's dad were there, and it's like that's a cool moment that it's not like all credit to McGregor, but just that he can bring that kind of that kind of people together, and it's a boxing match. We're all together watching that, and so then. I guess it's a good segue for number 2, because I'm probably the only one that's going to mention a female fighter. That's because just that 2013, 2014 was when I was really into MMA a lot, watching.
You should all leak pictures.
You
should taste leak pictures.
No, but one of the coaches on the Rousey versus Tate, but was they had my wife at the time, we really liked the one with Rousey versus Tate. And then the next season was all strawweights. And it was all women strawweights. They were introducing a strawweight division, and the winner of the show was going to be the first champion. Yeah. And the woman that stood out to me was Randa Marcos. She's Iraqi born, from Canada. She's built from Canada because her family left Iraq and moved to Canada. And she's called the Quiet Storm is her nickname, because she was very chill. She didn't put up with any of the hoopla in the house and all that. And then the two fighters that picked on her were Felice Herrig. I know y'all remember her.
Yeah, I like Felice Herrig.
And then the chick that ended up winning the show, Carla Esparza. She was the first champion. Well, on the show, there was so many clips of them messing with her on the team buses and crap like that, and she just put up with it. She was like that kid getting picked on in high school. Well, then it was her turn up, and against Felice Herrig, she freaking armbarred her and submitted her in less than a minute, and it was big shock. Felice was so cocky and shit, and Randa's just I'm gonna just beat your ass, and then she didn't end up winning the show. Like I said, Carla won, but then Carla had already lost the title, and then they fought in UFC later on, and she ended up beating Carla Esparza as well. But overall, her record wasn't great. She was kind of like a 500 fighter, win one, lose one. Still around. I know she had a kid, but she's like the only MMA fighter, honestly, that I follow. I still have her on Facebook and see things going on. She got married, had a kid. I don't know if she still fights anymore, but you know, it was just, you know, a good from, you know, you latch on to some people from these shows, you know. Not that I watched a ton of Ultimate Fighter, but anyway. So then moving on, y'all know me when getting into, you know, watching UFCs for the first time, coming over to y'all's house at like 2005. No, not GSP. I forgot to mention him. In that group of like in my 4 and 5.
Yeah.
But of course, number one is the Pitbull, Andre Arlovski.
Okay.
He was the first one that I latched onto. That this dude, big heavyweight with the freaking fangs on his mouthpiece and big ass hairy chest, and he was shredded
with the hair.
From Belarus, he was just pounding people, beating the shit out of everybody he fought.
There you go.
And then I don't know, he disappeared for a while or whatever, and he comes back and he's got the shaved chest, and he was never the same fighter.
The chest, he was like
his mojo got shaved off.
Like Samson, yeah, he got shaved his hair, and that was it. Yeah,
but yeah,
that's a good choice.
It's a Pitbull.
I like that one. Yeah,
he was champ though, right? Like he was heavyweight champ for a while.
Yeah, I think he was interim because it was
Tim Sylvia.
Sylvia, Jesus.
And then he got that interim champ, and I think he ended up losing it, but he held it for a little while. Okay, well, I'll go jump into mine. I get a few honorable mentions. You know, much like Todd started with Ken Shamrock, I'm going to start with his opponent, and Sean mentioned him as one of that 4-5 group. Good story, you know. Again, first UFC pay-per-view we ever watched, or first UFC event we ever watched was, you know, the end of the Ultimate Fighter, and then the main event was Ken Shamrock against this guy. I was fully expecting Ken Shamrock to win just because he was kind of like the name of MMA that we knew. But Rich Ace Franklin actually destroyed Ken Shamrock in that fight. He has a really good story behind him. Before he became an MMA fighter, he was a high school math teacher. So I guess being an educator myself, you know, drew me into that as well. So yeah, Rich Ace Franklin will be first honorable mention. Mike's number one is going to come in at my second honorable mention, the Huntington Beach bad boy, Tito Ortiz. Let me rephrase that. Mike's well-endowed, long-lost cousin, Tito Ortiz.
Runs in the family.
I mean, he just had a lot to kind of draw you into him. Like, he had the dyed blonde, you know, the beach blonde hair that was shaved down. He had the black.
Yeah.
What is that? Ricky Starks.
Who is that?
He's an AEW local guy named Ricky Starks.
He's from here. Okay.
Yep. But you know, he had the shaved down beach blonde hair. He had the black trunks with the flames on him. He was a ground and pound expert. Took you down, elbowed you in the face. There was just a lot of stuff to like about him. The Huntington Beach Bad Boy nickname was one of the best nicknames. And you know, and he was well endowed. You know, if you can see Mike's hands. So he would be my second honorable mention.
Yeah, long dong.
Next honorable mention comes in. First UFC pay-per-view we ever bought. We made mention that the main event was Chuck Liddell versus Randy Couture. The first match on the card was our first experience with George St. Pierre.
Yeah.
His opponent came out in a Jason mask from the movie from Friday the 13th movies. His name is Jason Mayhem Miller. And what I liked about this dude is he had very crazy personality. George St. Pierre beat the living piss out of this dude. And like, he just kept taking it, and like, he was just like, had a smile on his face while he was taking it. Which made me even like him more. So if you've watched the Ultimate Fighter series, there's an English asshole that came off the show. His name was Michael Bisping.
No, Jesus.
Michael Bisping,
one of my least favorite fighters in MMA.
He won one of the shows, so they asked him to come back on and coach. Jason Mayhem Miller had an absence from UFC for a while. I think he had some friction with Dana White. They asked him to come back and be the challenger for Michael Bisping in a title fight. So they were the coaches on the show. That show was hands down my favorite show of the Ultimate Fighter, strictly because of Jason Miller and his just quirky behaviors. He's a very immature guy, just very funny to watch.
He wasn't the dude that would say like, punch me as hard as you can, and he got like knocked the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
It was like in a bathroom or something.
I'm pretty sure the season that Uriah Faber coached that I was referring to was the same one that Ryan Hall was on, which is hands down probably my favorite season, aside from the first one.
But Jason Miller would have his fighters play pranks on Bisping's fighters, and Bisping would get his panties all in a bunch and get his feelings hurt. But he was just a character, very fun to watch. And like I said, my first experience with him was watching George St. Pierre just like punch and elbow his face, and he just sat and took it to a decision. So he'd be my last honorable mention. Jumping in the top 5, number 5, I'm gonna go back what Todd mentioned, Uriah Faber. Todd got hooked on Uriah Faber in the WEC. I got hooked on this guy in the WEC. His name is Cub Swanson.
Jesus.
Cub had kind of like the shredded physique, but he had like really cool tattoos on it. He had like 2 palm trees kind of going up his abs. That drew me in with the name Cub. What made me like him even more, though, he's very interactive with his fans. Like he's the type of guy where if you kind of we go back to the top, in no particular order, top 5 wrestlers. Carl Anderson made an honorable mention for me strictly because of the fact that he kind of communicates with his fans and will be on Twitter replying. We gave a shout out to Joey Harrington earlier for doing that. Cub Swanson's much the same. You send out a tweet to him, he'll either reply to you, like it. Very communicative with his fans. Seems like a great guy outside of the octagon. Number 4, this guy probably was responsible for my favorite fight in UFC of all time. The name Tim Sylvia was mentioned earlier when Sean was talking about Andrei Arlovski. My favorite fight of all time in the UFC was when Tim Sylvia had his arm broken by Frank Mir in an armbar.
Frank Mir.
And so Frank Mir, another guy, just seems kind of genuine. Has a great MMA podcast as well.
It's amazing how this is all coming back. When you mentioned Tim Sylvia, I'm like, who the fuck broke?
Another good Frank Mir fight. I don't know if this was UFC 100 or not, but Brock Lesnar against Frank Mir, and the first time, Brock was pounding Frank's face in, like to the point where his face looked almost broken. And somehow he was able to escape it, survive it, and grab Brock Lesnar's ankle and submit him. Pretty crazy. But Frank Mir, another longtime heavyweight champ in the UFC, had some great fights. Number 3, we talk about good physiques. We talk about guys who are not the tallest. And I know Todd and I can relate to this. But Sean Shark, one of the shortest guys I've ever seen, but had a phenomenal physique. Always in the title competition. I don't know if he ever won the belt or not, but he was always up there.
With BJ Penn beat him for it.
Yeah, so he held it for a little while, but he was always kind of more of a gatekeeper up in that number 1 contender spot.
Yeah, because it was the first year they started. Was it lightweight?
Yeah.
It was the first year they brought back lightweight. Him and Kenny Florian fought for the vacant title, and he beat Florian. But BJ Penn beat him for it.
Yeah. So he was always kind of in that like title picture. Won it briefly, but another guy had the frosted tips on his hair. Had the jacked physique. Very good wrestler. It was almost like when he got you on the ground, you lost. So the muscle shark, Sean Shark, comes in at number 3. Number 2 also goes back to that first pay-per-view we watched. And originally I was actually pulling against him, and because he was fought Matt Hughes, and there's so many things about this guy that just made me become a fan. Like it's the idea of he lost that fight to Matt Hughes. Looked like he had the fight won. That to me should have been called, and he should have won. Another guy that kept in great shape while he was fighting in the UFC. He was actually on the reality show. What was the show called? Kept. The show was called Kept. It was.
I had no idea what that show was called.
They were trying to win this celebrity.
Jerry Hall.
Jerry Hall. I think her name was Jerry Hall. It was a celebrity that they were trying to win. She was recently single, trying to win. I think he was eliminated on the 2nd or 3rd episode. Another guy who will communicate with you, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Twitter. You reach out to him. He actually had a role on the Mandalorian series where he played one of the Gamorrean guards, or was it the?
Yeah, it was one of the Gamorrean guards.
Played one of the Gamorrean guards on Mandalorian. Frank Twinkletoes Trigg.
Trigonomics.
I had one of his Trigonomics sweatshirt, lost it in a house fire. I was pretty pissed about that.
We had one too. You gave us one.
Yeah, because I actually.
I say I couldn't fit in it, but my ex-wife wore it on.
So Frank Twinkletoes Trigg comes in at number 2. And then my number 1, I thought Patrick was going to mention, and we mentioned his name as we were putting our list together. But I mean, this dude it goes back to Pride Fighting Championships, way back in the day. And if you needed a badass knockout, it was Mirko Cro Cop. I mean, Mirko Cro Cop Filipovic, head kick knockout master. I mean, guys got a highlight reel of kicking people in the head and
So
knocking
his
them out.
quote.
Right leg hospital.
Right leg hospital, left leg cemetery. And the crazy part was another guy had a phenomenal record in Pride, and then there's a lot of hype around him when he came to the UFC, and when he got to the UFC, he was very average, lost his first fight. But
Was that when they broke his eye and nearly killed
Oh,
him?
jeez. He crumpled like a sack of bricks.
But if we're talking about from an excitement standpoint and from just watching knockouts, I mean, this guy has highlight reel knockouts and all with kicks to the head, which is insane. So Mirko Cro Cop comes in at my number 1. So
I can say, I forgot, one to mention is Dan Henderson.
Yeah.
His knockout of Michael Bisping is amazing.
One of the most satisfying MMA.
He cocked back like something in a cartoon. It was like, boom, his chin. His chin got like dislocated after that.
Like super punch out.
Right, it was a cartoonish knockout.
I'd like to mention one other guy, not so much. His MMA career was good enough and important, and so he's not to be forgotten. But I like him more for his analyst work now than so much his fighting, because as a fighter he was very punchable face, kind of douchey. No one probably really liked him, but it's Chael Sonnen.
Yeah.
I actually like Chael Sonnen as a fighter.
Yeah,
He does a lot of analytics and analyst work now, doing commentary for fights and just kind of doing a lot of pre-fight talk and a breakdown. He's very, very good at that. He's got a lot different personality as an analyst than he did as a fighter, because as a fighter he was not on the level of Conor in terms of talking, but he would talk and give you some jab at you and stuff like that. But I respect him a lot more now for his analyst work, because he's so very detailed and very good. Kind of like Dan Orlovsky does for ESPN. Wasn't the best talent or even great, but his work as an analyst is so good and so detailed. He'll break down everything for a layperson.
Yeah.
But Chael Sonnen was a great commentator, pretty good fighter too.
I'm going to talk about guys who break down stuff analytically. This gentleman right here,
Was that?
Finn McDonald.
Oh, geez.
I think he's the best commentator around.
I already wrote him up, Letterman.
I love you, man.
Yeah.
But I would agree though. Chael Sonnen, he had that personality that just got under people's skin. But I didn't necessarily mind him. And another thing was there was nothing sexy about his game. Like he just came out and beat you.
He just came and did work.
There was nothing special about it. He just won.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that was his fight with Anderson Silva. It was he dominated Anderson Silva for 4 rounds, and
then,
I think he gets clipped at the end.
Yeah,
the 5th round.
Yeah, he went to go charge him, and he was trying to charge, and Anderson Silva was backing up and threw I believe a straight right jab, and he caught him because he was just going in like a bull and just got plopped. And that was, I think, probably the most memorable UFC fight from the days when I really kind of followed it. And maybe that's probably why I probably took Anderson Silva as my number 1, because that's what I remember the most of being like, holy shit, this sport is different. This is kind of fucking wild. Was him knocking out Chael Sonnen with that right as Chael just was
Speaking of Anderson Silva, I liked his fights. He was entertaining. I kind of laughed and liked his cockiness a little bit, but it was nice to see him get knocked out by Weidman. When he finally lost, when Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva was being all cocky, and Weidman, got that quick punch on him, and it was you couldn't believe what you saw, that he actually lost.
Oh, we version 4. Oh.
Let's see.
Oh, okay.
I can't count.
Tell the people what you're looking at.
Men's Fitness with GSP on the cover. And I got a Jiu-Jitsu Style magazine with Ryan Hall on the cover.
I like it. Pretty solid. I don't think anybody has any real arguments or debates.
I think I have the ESPN body issue with GSP on. I forget. I used to collect those. I do have the Gina Carano one.
Yeah.
Is
Ronda Rousey, yeah.
Is this our first confrontational or controversial top 5 list? I think we all are okay with everyone else's list. This isn't no real arguments here.
Biggest MMA disappointment.
Like your least favorite fighter?
Well, one that just disappointed you. You thought that they might have done better.
I can go
But
with my favorite fighter. I mean, Heath Herring. I was so excited when when the UFC picked him up, and I thought he was going to win the heavyweight title based off the crop of talent that they had at the time. I was like, he's over here dominating Japanese dudes in Pride, and he comes to UFC and he gets beat by a no-name guy named Jake O'Brien because he basically got laid on for 3 rounds.
My biggest UFC disappointment is that no one has dismembered Robert Covington.
Okay.
Colby Covington?
Same difference.
Yeah.
Whatever name the piece of shit's name is. Him. Someone end him, please. Thank you.
I mean, like what Todd said, Heath Herring, similar to Mirko Krokop, a lot of those Pride guys had a lot of hype around them when they came to UFC, and I was hoping the hype would be real, but it really didn't live up to it. But I mentioned it earlier, I think the fight that was most disappointing to me was McGregor against Cerrone because of the fact that, Cerrone was on this nice win streak and, seemed to be, looking for a title, looking for a nice title fight, and McGregor had been out of the sport for a little while. And then McGregor comes back and shoulders him in the face, and it's over. It's just,
I think that's the fight right there that kind of got me out of MMA because everything about it just smelled fishy, man. You mean to tell me a skilled veteran fighter is going to take 4 unconventional shoulders to the face and just stand there and take it? McGregor was out for almost a year or 2 from the sport, and he comes back, and it's like, what better way than to beat a guy like Donald Cerrone quickly to try and hype you back up and sell tickets and sell pay-per-views and all that, It just seemed, it just smelled wrong.
To jump in, pick up series, and I believe it's Kamaru Usman. He's known for doing the foot stomps on people's feet to really distract and get on their. I really dislike that about him. And I forget who he fought fairly recently. That was his main attack, was to just stomp on a dude's foot. I'm like, we don't want to see that.
Front kicks when they kick you right in the kneecap.
That could be cool.
That's
though.
the cheapest fucking shit.
No,
let me tear your ACL.
just stomping on the dude's foot to get him off his game. I get it from a tactical standpoint. It works. It's effective.
Yeah.
But no one wants to
the
watch
leg kicks when you see somebody with a red ass leg because they keep getting slapped by a foot.
Yeah.
It seems like nothing, but it's like, God, that has to suck.
Stomping on the foot is
Yeah.
kind of lame to me. Whatever. Not a fan of that.
Yeah, you get it done 10 times. How much does that have to fucking hurt?
Yeah.
My disappointment. I watched this guy get viral. Street Fighter.
Oh boy.
Oh Jesus.
Yes.
Kimbo
I
Slice?
don't know.
God rest his soul.
Kimbo Slice.
I thought you want to say Jorge Masvidal.
Shout out to Seth Petrozelli.
Man, he was just
Shout out to my
disappointing.
guy Seth Petrozelli from The Ultimate Fighter.
He ended up being a punk.
All hype. Just
Silverback.
just
All hype,
just a muscular body that couldn't really do anything.
Taking out Harambe right now.
To be fair, I don't think he didn't. He might have done some training, but his thing is really just hey, I just want to street fight you.
I'm gonna just punch you in the
Yeah,
face.
and I think he saw maybe an avenue to get into the UFC and make more money, and he went that route. That's what not being a good fighter.
But it was kind of funny though because
I think they make a Kimbo Slice round 5.
Wait, what's
I
that?
think they make a Kimbo Slice figure like that.
Oh, really?
Add it to the office.
the funny thing about that is, Roy Nelson was the guy that beat him on the Ultimate Fighter when they put him on the Ultimate Fighter.
Big country.
I remember there was this guy at the YMCA, and he was kind of ridiculous because he'd run around grunting and shit. He was a big dude, but he wasn't Carter defined or anything. But he was acting like he was on with MMA, and I was talking to him about it one time. He's like, "Oh, Kimbo's fighting this week. You think he's gonna win?" And I was like, "He's fighting Roy Nelson, so he's probably gonna get his ass kicked." And they were saying, what makes you think that? It's like, Wayne Nelson's a skilled MMA
He
fighter.
actually trains, even though he's fat as shit.
It's not exactly on topic, but I do have a grinds my gears for another episode related talking about like people in like gym and gym etiquette. Guys who shadow box in the gym in between their sets, or on the treadmill. You guys, stop it. You're not a fighter. You probably
Just
can't
air
fight.
punching and shit.
Yeah, like they're literally doing like
Like the Rocky
Box-
Balboa.
Like you would see, like when they're showing like a fighter, like giving like his background, he's sitting there.
yeah.
room.
The D bag in the gym.
Would have to do that at the camera.
Yeah, like, and it's every gym. It's not just like a Planet Fitness or like it's high end, low end gyms, whatever.
And I get what you're saying because of the fact that they're gyms for that. You know, they're gyms for you to box. There's gyms for you to do jujitsu. If you're just going to hit the weights, why?
Right, or go to a gym that has a punching bag and a body bag that you want to do that. Like, don't sit there in between your sets in the mirror and like train shadow box in front of the gym.
Pretend like
you're
you know what
not
the hell
cool.
you're doing.
No one takes
Showing
you
off
seriously.
everybody else in the gym. Yeah.
And they're always like the most muscular dudes, and they're just sitting there doing like, you probably can't fight to save your life.
No,
They probably listen to Eye of the Tiger while they do it.
probably listen to the Weights Awakens podcast.
I hope they don't.
But you know,
Hope they do and get a
we're
lesson.
still on the topic of what grinds your gears, and you're talking about the gym. It's almost impossible to do supersets at the gym when you have blue hair just sitting on machines and taping the machines.
Same thing when people decide they want to take photos of themselves, like flexing after to show off their little pump for people. But again, that's a topic for another day. I think we've exhausted this one for the night and for ourselves for the night. So we'll go ahead and end on that.
I didn't say my disappointment, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
no, it's all right. I was gonna throw out well that Tank Abbott was like that too.
Oh yeah.
He just like beat the fuck out of people until he fought somebody with actual skill, and they made him look silly.
Well, since we talked about like Ken Shamrock, I think the other guy that most people had heard of transitioning to UFC was Tank Abbott. They were like, oh, this dude can just beats the shit out of people, and then like you said, he was just,
I watched on when I had one of those boxes that I had bought one off of eBay with a chip in it. And I saw an old ass pay per view that I could get for free, and it was Tank Abbott. He fought that dude Kimbo.
Yeah.
And that dude submitted him in like less than a minute because he actually had skill. Tank Abbott comes like wailing fists at him, and this dude is like ridded, shredded, and he just like puts him in some ass like Kimura or something and submits him like out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, because Tank Abbott has no skill whatsoever.
he went out there in some jorts.
Roll P shorts.
But anyway, to be real quick, my disappointment was Holly Holm for her upset on Ronda Rousey and everybody thinking that, like, wow, how could she beat such a big, I remember really liking her after that, and then she like freaking loses her first title defense. It was like, okay, big old fluke, but it was, I liked Ronda Rousey's run, but then she started getting cocky. I loved watching her get her freaking head kicked in. That was awesome too. So, anyways.
Before we close out, though, one thing I do want to say, since we're talking about all these old school UFC fights, there was an old fighter, again, he was kind of big around the time of Shamrock and Tank Abbott. His name was Mark Kerr, the Smashing Machine. And they're actually the same company that released the Iron Claw movie is going to be doing a docu-movie, like a docu-film on him, or biopic, whatever you want to call it, where Dwayne Johnson's going to be playing him. So definitely want to check that out.
Didn't know that.
Nice. Well, gentlemen, good list all around. Appreciate your efforts on a quick rep. We didn't really kind of plan this one out to do that, so fairly last minute, but way to rally together and get that together. We'll close out by saying, as always, thank you for listening. Comment, like, subscribe, follow us on every site. We're on
Spotify,
Apple,
Amazon Music,
Amazon.
Gosh, the 4 majors, and he had like Grinder on there.
Wait, somebody might be on Grindr.
Twitter, Facebook,
OnlyFans,
ManyVids,
Ask Jeeves.
Fansly,
Saturday.
Footfinder,
JDate.
Pornhub,
ChristianMingle.com.
FarmersOnly.com. And on that note, Wagons out.
Out.